Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you today. The first question out of the gate, the first story, is about Black Lives Matter. Do Black Lives Matter on our city streets? Because there's a lot of indications that they don't actually, that our cities are becoming shooting galleries for young black people, and no one seems to really care, at least the people leading those cities. And we're going to talk about that. And of course, a little bit of good news. The Electoral College survives to fight another day. There was a major decision in the Supreme Court that directly impacts the Electoral College or preserves it to a certain extent as it is. So we're going to talk about that subject. And then another piece of good news, I suppose, it's the end of racism. Racism is over as we know it because Colin Kaepernick has now signed with Disney. And so with Kaepernick and Disney all together, it's got to mean something. It must mean that we have finally arrived. But before we get too deep into it, I want to bring up a very quick, sad story. I want to give a special shout out to somebody that I think is dear to many people in my listening audience. I know he's very dear to me, and that is none other than Charlie Daniels of the Charlie Daniels Band. He died yesterday. The news broke after the show, 83 years old. He died apparently of a stroke, a hemorrhage in the brain. We hope he didn't suffer. Certainly prayers out to his family and friends and many millions of fans literally throughout the world, but certainly here in the United States. Charlie Daniels was not only a magnificent entertainer and musician, really one of a kind. I mean, I know he's best known for like Devil Went Down to Georgia. That was like his biggest pop hit. But I can tell you, as someone who grew up in the South, was a big fan of Southern rock, country music, Charlie Daniels was an icon. And if you really want to hear his music, you need to get a little deeper than just his pop stuff, because he was an amazing entertainer and a very true patriot. I mean, in his later years, he spoke out a lot. He blogged quite a bit. He was a strong supporter of President Trump, strong supporter of everything Americana and the Constitution. And so Charlie Daniels will be greatly missed. The good thing about when you have a legacy as long as his was, we can celebrate his life on a daily basis, listening to his music. And I was listening to a little bit of it coming into work today. So rest in peace, Charlie. You will be missed more than you probably know. But we're going to move on now to our first story from the Washington Post. Major U.S. cities gripped with crisis now face spike in deadly shootings, including of children. So tragically, children have been killed recently in places like New York, in places like Atlanta and Chicago. Basically, every major city that is run by Democrats, which are most of them, are in some form or fashion in shambles. And it's an ongoing story. We talked a little bit about yesterday how people are moving out of the cities in droves, and you can't really blame them. They are becoming shooting galleries, and it is very sad indeed. Let's get into this a bit. As the nation faces a pandemic, financial catastrophe, and massive social justice protests, it's suddenly also confronting a spike in violence in some of its major cities. Wow, what a surprise. I mean, you let lawlessness in the street, you defund the police or make them feel like they're persona non grata, and violence spikes. I mean, who could have predicted that? Probably no one. What a shock, man. Tragedy struck the urban centers thousands of miles apart, with 65 people shot over the weekend in New York and 87 in Chicago, and homicides climbing from Miami till Milwaukee. Though the summer months in the United States often augur more violence, in other words, people get hot and heavy and angry, I guess, the recent toll has been particularly devastating in communities where the victims, including young children. So they're saying it's a tragedy. And it is a tragedy. There's no question. When anyone, all lives matter. That's the way it should be. And I know you can get canned for saying that. So I apologize ahead of time to an algorithm. I'm just saying that Black lives matter. These children's lives matter. They matter to me. I'm not so sure they matter to the Democrats that are running those cities because, action speaks louder than words. And their action has actually shown that some Black lives don't seem to matter that much. And it's not me saying that, by the way. It's Black people saying that, like the man that got on and was crying about his son that was killed out there in Chaz or Chomp or whatever they want to call it. He was talking about that Black Lives Matter. And the young mother that had her 8-year-old daughter, I think she was 8 years old, killed in Atlanta over the weekend. She asked that question about her daughter's Black Lives Matter. So don't take it from me. They're telling you Black people in America who are losing their children and their loved ones are speaking out. I wonder if anybody's actually listening. I can tell you here at JMT, we are definitely listening. But tragedy. So I thought I'd look up the word tragedy to see if it fits this. And let me say right off the bat that there is nothing more tragic than losing a child. It is just unbelievable. But here's the definition of tragedy. An event causing great suffering, destruction, and distress, such as a serious accident, crime, or natural catastrophe. Well, that sounds like a pretty good description of not only a tragedy, but it sounds like a description of the current state of the Democratic Party. Because think about it. An event causing great suffering and destruction. The Democrats seem to be all about destruction. I mean, they've been supporting riots in the streets long before George Floyd. They just have. And distress such as serious accident. Well, unfortunately, it's no accident, really. When you shoot into a car or you shoot into a crowd like they did in Chicago, they were having an anti-violence party, and they sprayed the party with gunfire, and a child winds up dead. I don't know. This tragedy, yes, but accident? I don't know if it's an accident. It is certainly a crime, and it seems to be a natural catastrophe that wherever the Democrats are in charge, things turn into a catastrophe naturally. So to me, it's a pretty good description of this current state of the Democratic Party. This is what Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms said. She said, "You shot and killed a baby." She was talking about this young child that was killed in Atlanta over the weekend. What happened, by the way, in that, apparently, at least as far as I can tell, is this young mother and her young daughter were driving in a car, were a bit confused about where they were, and ended up in the area where that Wendy's was burned to the ground after the police shooting there. And there's Black Lives Matter have been allowed to just congregate there and basically take over that portion of the city. Well, she drove her car in there and attempted to turn around, and a couple of shots were fired into the car, and her daughter ended up dead. Imagine that. So to me, it's perfectly predictable, unexcusable, but perfectly predictable. But the mayor said, "You shot and killed a baby." She gave a very emotional press conference yesterday, and then announced later in that afternoon that she is now tested for COVID-19, corona positive, and is obviously going to have to be in quarantine for 14 days. Now, I wish her nothing but the best. I don't wish any ill towards anyone. But my first thought, I got to admit, was that's a bit convenient that you announced that you're going to crack down on the what's happening in Atlanta. But, oh, by the way, I got to take off for 2 weeks. It's convenient timing nonetheless. But, far be it from me to, I don't wish her any harm. I'm serious about that. But she said this at a news conference after, and I hope I say the name right, Socoria Turner, an 8-year-old. I think we're going to show you some pictures because, does this Black Lives Matter? This young lady right here, this is the young lady that was killed. I mean, she reminded me, we got a series of pictures here I'm going to show that, I hate to say it, man, but it reminds me of my grandchildren. I got a granddaughter that looks about like that right now. She's not quite that old, about half her age, but, I hope that she will get to be that old. And she was killed during a holiday weekend, the 4th of July. The young girl was fatally shot while riding in a car with her mother Saturday night at a time when revelers, and demonstrators across the country were marking the 4th of July celebration and protest. Well, what did you expect? What did you expect when you let lawlessness into the street and you shame the cops so much and basically you're charging them with murder and everything else that they're not out there in full. What do you expect? And here's something I want to point out to you, and some people may find this controversial, but you notice in this article, and as I'm reading it verbatim in some cases, there is no mention of race whatsoever. No mention at all. The race of the people killed, the child killed, the race of the shooters, none of that is mentioned. Do you know why? I bet you can guess. Because it doesn't fit the narrative, because it's black on black crime. And it doesn't fit the narrative of Black Lives Matter. Because obviously this young girl's life doesn't matter to the people that shot her. But I just thought I'd point that out to you. I guarantee you, if it was white anything that shot a black, it would be cause for more rioting in the streets. I'm not, advocating for any of that stuff. I'm just pointing out the facts. You can deal with it as you wish. That same night, as this young lady was shot, 11-year-old Davin McNeil was at an anti-violence cookout in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, when bullets struck him. So he was at an anti-violence cookout and violence broke out. There's a picture of young Devin right there. And like I say, reminds me of, I've got a young grandson coming along. He's only about 2 years old, and he just got a T-Rex dinosaur, and he was telling me all about it, man. But I hope to maybe watch him play sports someday. And he looks like he might grow up to be just like this young man. I hope his life matters. And yeah, I have black grandchildren. Figure it out. But so Black Lives Matter a great deal to me. One of my sons down in Miami just had one of his best friends shot at a picnic and killed just about 2 weeks ago. Early 20s, dead and gone. And it was all about black on black crime. And I'm not saying that it takes away from anything of police brutality and George Floyd and all that. But George Floyd, who are they killing these people in the name of? George Floyd? I don't know. To me, what's happening on our streets has moved way past George Floyd. I bet the shooters don't even know who he is. In Chicago, certainly not to be outdone, 7-year-old Natalia Wallace was outside her family's house during a holiday gathering as the shooting began. Both children were killed at these shootings. So this is Natalia Wallace. Look at her. Man, isn't she precious? My understanding of this particular story is her family had moved away from this neighborhood because of the violence, but were back for a party with another family member celebrating the 4th of July when young Natalia was shot, gunned down. Now, the mayor of Washington, D.C., Chicago just the other day, Mayor Lightfoot, she said in response to this that it is because of racism that this violence is happening. And that President Trump, she actually had the audacity to say this, that President Trump was the cause of this because he's fanning the flames of racism for political gain inside of Chicago. Now, if a black person shoots another black person, in this case, a child, that's somehow President Trump's fault. I don't get it, man. But the bottom line in this, every one of these children I just showed you, obviously are black, and they're likely all shot by black people. Where are the protests about this? Are they going to protest this? Mostly peaceful protest? Now, I understand, let me make myself very clear. I'm not saying that the black community isn't mourning the loss of these people, these children. I'm sure they are tremendously. I can tell you in my own little hometown, we've had the loss of young black people, victims of black on black crime, and the community is devastated by it. So I without a doubt, I think I'm very comfortable saying that the vast majority, if you want to lump people into one group of African Americans in this country, can't stand this violence, desperately want something done about it, are speaking out about it. But you don't hear their voices on the nightly news because it doesn't fit the narrative. And the last thing, and I'm not talking about the concept of Black Lives Matters, I'm talking about the actual organization, and there is a difference. The actual organization is a communist Marxist organization. Do a little research and you will see. If African American people. You're being played by this group. It's led, quite honestly, by a lot of white folks in it that are making big money, and they want to destroy America, and they absolutely destroying black neighborhoods, destroying black lives is a part of their agenda. There is no doubt about it. If it wasn't, why would they tear down Frederick Douglass statue? Think about that. If you know your history, you'll know that that shows that he's one of the greatest black Americans ever, one of the greatest Americans in history, color aside, Frederick Douglass. And his statue was desecrated and torn down in New York over the weekend. Wow. I mean, amazing. He's known for his Independence Day speech, by the way. You might want to check it out. Back to this article, the burst of bloodshed came at a particularly fraught time in the nation's relationship with its police forces, amid waves of demonstrations decrying police tactics, brutality, and racism following the death of George Floyd while in custody in Minneapolis. George who? George Floyd? What does shooting a young girl in Atlanta, a young boy in D.C., and another young girl in Chicago have anything to do with police, with George Floyd, with anything? What does that have to do? It has nothing to do with it. And you know, you don't see this on the mainstream media, and I might get canned for saying this, but as long as I got breath in my lungs, as long as I got the blessings of this microphone, I'm going to call it out. And let me tell you, black lives absolutely matter. They matter a great deal to me. I have young black children, as I've told you, grandchildren that matter, that are near and dear to my heart as possibly can be. I can't even fathom losing one of them to this ridiculous nonsense. So I'm going to call it out every time. I came out strongly against what happened to George Floyd, and I'm going to come out strongly against this. This is what happens when Democrats and progressives carry things to extremes. Progressives always carry it to extreme. Are there progressives that really believe that Black Lives Matter? Yes, but they carry it to the extreme. You know, police brutality, does it exist? Yes, but they carry it to the point that they're defunding the police, and the neighborhoods that are going to be impacted the first and the worst are the poorest neighborhoods, which unfortunately include a lot of great African-American people who are just trying to get by and raise their families. And they don't like this, but their voices are silenced because it does not fit the narrative. And you keep voting for the same people over and over again. And in this idea that the nation's relationship with the police force, let me tell you, and I've seen this firsthand, the nation's relationship with the police force is really not all that bad. The media, the progressive leftists that are running the Democratic Party, yes, your party, if you I'm not talking about all Democrats, but your party, make no mistake, your party of JFK asks not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Some of the greatest words a president has ever spoken. That party is dead and gone and taken over by leftist, extremist progressives, and in some cases outright communists. And now creepy Uncle Joe, who, he's going to do whatever they tell him to do. You want to know what Joe Biden's going to do? Exactly whatever they tell him to do. Let me put it that way. That's on. But the relationship between our police force is really not that bad. But the media makes it out that it is terrible. And of course, they show these ridiculous people that they let just bully cops. How many videos have you seen where you have a white person and sometimes a black person in the face of a black police officer? Multiple times now I've seen this, and they're saying you're a traitor to your race. So you have a black person that wants to serve this nation and their community by being a police officer that put a stop to this kind of stuff, and they are told by Black Lives Matter and Antifa and other yahoos on the street that they are a traitor to their race. I thought the whole dream of Martin Luther King was not to look at skin color, but the quality of character, and to put black people in positions of leadership, to have more black people on police force. So how can you possibly be a traitor to your race, if you want to look at it that way, and be serving that either in the U.S. military or the armed services and the police force? To me, that actually shows, if you want to break it down to race, that you care enough to put your life on the line for your community, and they're treated like crap right now. But police officers understand this, and I think most of you do. It's not the nation that feels this way. It is a loud and ridiculous and vile minority. And yes, they are a minority, in my opinion, but it's an opinionated fact nonetheless, that are actually opposed to it. And it starts with the leadership of the Democratic Party. Look at what's happening in these cities. Who can you blame? You can't blame Republicans for anything that's happening in Chicago. You can't blame anybody but progressive Democrats that are taking. Remember the mayor's race? And I don't want to get on too much of a rant. I want to keep going. But let me just state this and we'll move along. Go back and look at the video of the last debate between the two women that were left standing for the mayor's race in Chicago. They were literally trying to step over each other to get to the progressive left. They were trying to get as far left as they possibly could, and Lightfoot did a better job of it. And you people in Chicago either voted for her or didn't vote at all. And that's what you got, man. In the upheaval since police have been facing calls for their departments to be defunded and their operations to be stripped down. So that's what we need. Less police officers in these impoverished inner city neighborhoods. That'll make you safe. Putting them on the defensive as they have been at the center of political and social tempests. Putting us on the defensive, and when I say us, I mean not just white folks, okay? I'm talking about law-abiding, loving American patriotic citizens. We're the ones on the defensive right now. The police, as far as I know, are still armed. You know, they may be holding back right now, and who could necessarily blame them? But look at this picture, and we've showed this video. This is what it's coming to if you're a citizen in this country. Look at the McCloskeys. They're literally defending their home and now have had to do it multiple times, have had to hire private security to defend their home simply because they don't want their home burned down. They don't want the threat of them being killed and their dog being killed. And these people, according to CNNs of the world, are the villains. The people shooting these young children in Atlanta, not so much. But the McCloskeys defending their home are like, racist, violent thugs. I mean, it's just insane, man. Did you see where Rob Reiner, just to show you where we've gone now, Rob Reiner, and condolences to him to losing his father, but Rob Reiner, meathead from All in the Family, that guy, came out and said that at the November election, for the presidential election, he said we will see exactly how many racists we have in the United States of America. And what he meant clearly is if you vote for Trump, you're a racist. It don't matter what color you are. You vote for Trump, you're a racist. So, I guess that's kind of tagging on to what Joe Biden said. If you vote for Donald Trump, if you don't vote for me, then you ain't black. Well, as I say, progressives always take it to the extreme. So Rob Reiner took his cue from his leader, Joe Biden, and now he stepped it up a step further, which is what progressives always do. They take it to the extreme. If you think it's bad now, wait till you elect them into power. It'll be worse because they take it to the extreme. But Rob Reiner took his cue from old creepy Uncle Joe and said, well, if you vote for President Trump, you're just a racist. It don't matter. 65 million of you out there, mostly bad people, like Biden said. Well, you just listen to these progressives. They tell you what they really think. You don't have to guess. That's one good thing about them. You don't have to guess. Take whatever they say and multiply it by 2, and that's probably what's actually going to happen. In New York, where police officers have bristled in the face of criticism, is that what they've been doing? Chief Terrence Monahan, who is no friend to them, by the way, described the 4th of July holiday as one of the most violent weekends we've had in recent history and called June record-setting. Yep, you're probably right, sir. And I say you because you probably should have resigned, basically, rather than follow de Blasio's orders, but you and your boss, Comrade de Blasio, are to blame for this. There's no doubt. Democrats, and I mean, this may be controversial, but I'm just telling you like it is. Democrats have blood on their hands. Look at what happened out there in Chaz or Chomp. The mayor of Seattle, I absolutely believe this with all my heart. The mayor of Seattle and the governor of Washington, both liberal progressive Democrats, wanted things to get bad enough in Chaz and Chomp. I'm not saying they wanted people to be killed, but they wanted it to be bad enough that President Trump would intervene and there would be a big national scene and they could blame it all on Trump. But they waited so long that a couple of teenagers got gunned down there, both of them black, and they finally had to do something. Blood is on their hands because it was inevitable that when you have lawlessness, you're going to have rapes and murders and everything in between. I mean, that's just the way it is. And it's coming to a neighborhood near you, if not already. This is a tough summer. This is what Monahan, the police chief, said at a briefing about crime statistics Monday. It's quite obvious a lot of people are walking around with guns. So guns, what did they just appear? Were they like stuffed in? I kind of got a theory here. Billy Bob tells me that this might be something to do. If you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, it's Billy Bob Bass. He's got a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But he told me earlier in the show, yeah, I'm a fish whisperer. Some of us are crazier than others. There you go, sicker than others. Look that up. You'll probably see me. I wear it proudly. But he says maybe the guns were hiding in all those statues. Maybe they found out that the guns were hidden in the statues, and that's why they tore them down, and now everybody's armed. Because it's like all of a sudden guns are in the streets of New York and Chicago and places like that. It's like they just manna from heaven. The gun, raining guns, maybe it's raining men or whatever. But it just shows you the ludicrousness of this. So you cut the police force, you cut the budget, you stop undercover anti-violent thing, and you pull back police officers. You won't let them do anything. They have to stand there like statues and be called everything but a child of God. And you expect nothing to happen? I mean, I guess you just expect the lilies to blossom or something like that? I don't understand. Some law enforcement officials and their political allies have sought to link the recent violence with anti-brutality protests. Really? Really? The mostly peaceful protests? Now, see, this is the thing. If you're out there protesting against what happened to George Floyd, I'm with you. I'm not with you shutting down streets, but peaceful protests, but that's not what we've had. We might have started with that. But when you allow that to be hijacked by hoodlums, some of them white, by the way, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, a lot of them a bunch of white folks. They're so ashamed of what they do, and they wear masks so they don't let their mama know what's up. The looters seem like a lot of them not wearing masks, but all the ones like setting the fire and breaking it in, they're all wearing masks because they are ashamed of what they do. They know. Did you see where a grandma in Detroit, actually a white grandmother, by the way, not that it matters, turned in her white granddaughter for looting when they put out pictures of her busting in a building and setting it on fire? She turned her in. Hey, that's my kind of grandma, right? My grandma would have done that to me. I guarantee you. She'd have whooped my behind and turned me in. On Monday, Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel said on Fox News that the demonstrations have now led to a lot of violence continuing across this country. She said, it's sad to me that we're not hearing Democrats talk about the 7 children that were killed this past weekend, most of them African American. I'm with you on that. We're not hearing about things that are happening across this country as the violence continues to spread out of their control. Ronna, you're absolutely right. We're hearing crickets from the Democrats, period, in general, period. But you know who else we're hearing crickets from? And this is where Ronna might differ with me. We're hearing a lot of crickets from Republicans. Where is the Republican leadership that would stand forward and say, look, Frederick Douglass was a Republican. I guarantee you if Frederick Douglass were alive today, he would stand up for this. The only person that I see routinely speaking, and so I know I'm labeling with a broad brush, so there surely are Republicans, Liz Cheney ain't one of them, by the way, who are with the president on this. But we can't hear their voices very loud. You need to speak up. What? Speak up. I can't hear you. Because I don't expect anything from the Democrats. I don't expect. And, of course, President Trump, if he even mentions what's happening, what's really happening, oh, yeah, he's a racist, man, for even mentioning. The confluence of pandemic, social justice, protest, and violence was perhaps nowhere more stark than in Atlanta, where a wave of activism, research activism, that's what, burning down the Wendy's and shooting into cars that come by, that's activism. I'd call it something else. But it said activism resurged after a police officer shot and killed Rashard Brooks on June 12th next to a Wendy's restaurant. tragic as it may be. The location had become the center of protest block parties. They were allowing block parties there. Don't worry about the COVID. You can't go to church. You might not be able to go to the beach, and they're shutting restaurants down in Miami. But if you want to have a block party and a bonfire around the burned out Wendy's, that's cool. Until an 8-year-old gets shot. Then maybe not so cool. With police keeping I like how they criticize the police keeping a hands-off approach as it became a gathering spot. So that, let me just put this out there to you. And I want to speak to Black America right now. And really all Americans, really. But think about this. The Democrats, and this sounds very conspiratorial, but I'm asking for a friend, as they say. Democrats are allowing black people to congregate in big numbers. In the middle of this pandemic, you can't go to a Trump rally, so they're trying to protect white folks, so to speak. But black people, they can not only congregate in big groups in the middle of a pandemic, but in the state of Washington now, where they've passed mandatory masks for everybody, you can opt out of it if you're black. So if you're a black person, you don't have to wear a mask in Washington, so they're protecting the white folks. You can, I'm just saying, is this part of a plandemic? Is it anything like Planned Parenthood that just happened to put all the abortion clinics when they first started right next to black neighborhoods? Where like in New York City, there are more black babies aborted than born? I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. You decide what it is, but I'm asking for a friend. Is that a plandemic? Maybe. On Monday morning, officers were there cleaning off them. And I'm going to tell you right now, I may go long in this story and I may not even get to the others. So I'm just telling you, this to me is a very important story. So let me check my time. On Monday morning, officers were there cleaning off the memorial in Atlanta, memorials and tents that had been erected, reflecting the changed environment since an 8-year-old girl was struck and killed by gunfire across the street Saturday. So that's what it takes. So you have to have the death of an innocent child in order to get something done? Is that what it takes? I don't know, man. Law and order. Are you listening, Black America? Because what they're telling you here is that it takes the death of your children to actually bring law and order back to the street. But hey, no wonder if that's true, then no wonder Joe Biden is leading in the polls. Because we know, take him at his word. I'm going to keep playing this video over and over, so get used to it, because the media won't tell you who the real Joe Biden is. I want you to listen to this. This is Joe Biden when he was as cognizant as he's ever going to be, a much younger man, and he's telling you that he doesn't care what's happening in black neighborhoods. He doesn't care what's happening in your children, lack of education, no job. He doesn't care as long as he gets those predators, your children, off the street, and his grandma and his mama is safe. That's all that matters. The reasons why your neighborhoods are going to hell in a handbasket doesn't matter. That's the guy you're electing for president. You don't have to take my word for it. As I say, take Progressive's word for it. Here's Progressive Joe. Check him out.
Take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter, or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will. or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now.
That's enough.
And Madam President,
it doesn't matter. That's the guy, and I just got to say it. Call me what you want. But Black America, is that your savior? The guy who's saying he doesn't care what's happening in your neighborhood. He just expects you to go along, get along, and vote. The Democratic Party doesn't give a hoot about what happens in black neighborhoods. They're in charge of these black neighborhoods. They're in charge of every major city in the United States of America, and they don't care. If they did, let me put it this way. They either don't care or they're incompetent. Either one of them isn't going to help you. Think about that. The Democrats, Joe Biden has been up there for 50 dadgum years. 50 years. He's either incompetent or he doesn't care. And he just told you he doesn't care. But yet this is the guy that is going to save you. You don't have to like Donald Trump. You can hate Donald Trump. You can believe all the nonsense rhetoric you want about Donald Trump. But let me tell you, you know Joe Biden. Yeah, you know Joe Biden. He's the guy just recently, within the last 2 years, said that, I know about black children. They jumping on my knee. I love them and all that. Little cockroaches. I learned about cockroaches. That's your guy. So be woke, but be truly woke. Go and vote for Joe if you want to. But understand this. You are voting for a guy who, by his own words, when he was as cognizant as he's ever going to be, said, I don't care about your children. I don't care what the family structure was like out of wedlock. I don't care. They got no conscience. Your black children, tens of thousands of them, have no conscience whatsoever. So you're not much of a parent. That's Joe Biden. That's not me. He's telling you that. Are you listening? Are you listening? I mean, it's just amazing, but apparently not, because I want to show you, this is the kind of leader, and I'm just going to call it out. I'm going to keep calling it out, as I say. The leadership in the black community in many, many ways is terrible. Listen to this guy right here. This is Gerald Griggs, vice president of Atlanta's NAACP. Now, this young 8-year-old girl has just been shot and killed. And this is what he said. He said he blamed police for much of the recent crime, suggesting they have not been doing enough. So the defund people, the people you have literally neutered and told to take a back seat, they hadn't been doing enough. Man, wow. Is there no shame anymore in America? I mean, good Lord, this guy has no shame. But Griggs went on to say, listen to this. This is a so-called leader in the black community. A lot of the onus for the violence falls right at the feet of law enforcement. I mean, I can't believe that I'm even reading this. But he says, there are certain elements in our community that don't take a break when the police take a break. No joke. He said, you're sworn to protect and defend, talking about police officers now, but when there are a few rogue police being held accountable, you decide to shirk your responsibility. They've been told by a black mayor to stand down. I mean, good Lord. That speaks volumes, he said, about why people were protesting to begin with. Man, I almost have no words for this. But as you can imagine, I probably got one or two. What do they want? What do they want from police officers? Do we really want robo-cops? Because I'm not, think about this. Police officers have one thing in common with all of us. You know what that is? They're people. They're going to fall short of the glory. There's a book out there somewhere that a lot of people have forgotten about that talks about that. Police officers are human beings, so they're going to have all the emotions and flaws and everything, not excusing anything. But you can't sit there and tell a police officer that you're everything but a child of God, literally spitting in his face, telling him that he's a murderer, all of this. And keep in mind, in Atlanta, and I want to let the facts speak for themselves, so I'm not commenting too much on the case, but under Georgia law, a taser is considered a lethal weapon. And under Georgia law, a police officer is allowed to use deadly force if he thinks his life or others are threatened. So this person fired a taser, which is under Georgia law, a lethal weapon, and the police officer fired and killed the guy. Now, you could make a case that he shouldn't have done that. But I don't see how you can make a case that he committed murder under Georgia law. And that's what we're supposed to follow. But maybe what we need is robo-cops, really, so we can just program them. We take the whole human element out of it if possible and just have robots. because you're going to, as long as you have people, you can't sit there and call police officers what you call them and expect them, just to understand the confusion. Can you imagine being a police officer right now and you listening to the BS that this guy, Griggs, is putting out there, that it's your fault that the area you've been told to stand down from now has innocent victims being shot and killed? Children, for God's sakes. You know, that's got to tear at their hearts. You know they want to do something about it, but they've been told to stand down, and now they're told to do something. So that's what it takes, I guess, in order for police officers to be allowed to do their job. An 8-year-old girl has to be shot. I mean, that's what it seems like to me, and I'm sad to report that, man. But they also say here is the police chief of Chicago, David Brown, Chicago's police superintendent, talking about the people that were shot in Chicago, the children. He said they ranged from 20 months to 14 years old. 20 months! A baby was literally shot in a car seat, for God's sakes, in Chicago. And actually, this guy Brown, I don't want to beat him up too much because he seems to be concerned in general. But this is what he said about it. He said, none were talking about these children, none were intended targets, but were in what wound up being at the wrong place at the wrong time. But they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, I understand that. There's certainly places you don't need to be. But if it's not safe in an American city, so I guess if you live in Chicago, it's the wrong place at the wrong time. If you live in New York City under Mayor de Blasio, you're at the wrong place at the wrong time. If you live in Atlanta, for God's sakes now, and you're a black 8-year-old, you're just at the wrong place at the wrong time. If it keeps going this way, the United States will become the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's what's got me so upset about all of this, because I don't want to see my country become a country that it's the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't want to see my country become a country that's not worth defending, that our great all-volunteer military, with a lot of black people in it, by the way, don't want to serve anymore because it's the wrong place at the wrong time. Or police officers, for God's sakes, the starting salary for a police officer in this country is $32K. 32 grand. Would you get out there and do it for that? I don't know that I would say want one of my kids to do it. I'd be proud of them, but I'd have to question them about it right now. Think about that. If our country becomes one that's not worth serving and not worth protecting, then we're all going to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is, by the way, and I'll end the story with this. This is the right place at the right time for patriotic Americans like the late Charlie Daniels to stand up. Remember one of his songs, Whoever Think We'd Ever Be Proud Again in America? He did a song about that back then, and we need that song now. So this is the right place at the right time if you care about America to make a stand. You don't have to love Donald Trump, but my God, you know what you're going to get with Joe Biden, because he said right out, he don't care. He doesn't care. You know, he just wants to see your children locked away forever. And that was brought to you by the Democrats, by the way. Anyway, I get it. I don't know. Maybe I'm over the top with it. Let me know on Facebook. Let me know, because I want to read one more thing on this story, because this bothers the heck out of me too, man. But this is Alicia Butler, a community organizer on the South Side in Chicago, said she believes the way to curb the violence is to confront systematic racism. I keep hearing that. So maybe what we need to do is just tear down Frederick Douglass. That ought to do it, man. And I'm going to bring that into another story if we got time. I really don't have much time. I'm going to jump to the very last story here. And I meant to talk to you about the Supreme Court. You can read about that. But a sign that racism is over is that Colin Kaepernick now has signed a deal with Disney for millions of dollars, man. Colin Kaepernick they're going to document his life, man. So tear down Frederick Douglass, elevate Colin Kaepernick. Sounds like a fair trade to me. Racism is over. Happy days are here again. Think about it. Colin Kaepernick, this never gets really said. If there's anyone who has lived the American dream, who has not seen any oppression whatsoever, it's Colin Kaepernick. He has lived a life of privilege from day one. And he has been a pampered athlete from day one. Skin color aside, doesn't matter. He has been nothing. He has fallen. He fell out of the NFL and fell into a multi-million-dollar deal with Nike that is now losing like $500 million since he went there. Maybe he'll do that for Disney as well. But these people, man, I mean, this guy is now the poster child for oppression in America. So they tear Frederick Douglass's statue down. And if you're out there listening and you don't know who Frederick Douglass is, first of all, shame on you. That's why I'm battling ignorance and apathy. If you don't care, that's stupid. Look him up, because Frederick Douglass represents everything that is good in America. It was amazing. And his statue was torn down by Black Lives Matter. And this dude, Colin Kaepernick, is now what? The Frederick Douglass of our time? That is why, by the way, I have to battle ignorance and apathy daily. Because if you think that Frederick Douglass is an eyesore and needs to be torn down, and Colin Kaepernick is the one to elevate, then you, my friend, are ignorant to say the least. And apathetic, I don't know. But I'm going to keep battling every day. I'm going to keep speaking as long as I can. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page. Like it, share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. I think we all should agree as Americans that if ever our country needed praying for in unison, it is right now. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.